Just gather it.
Uh,
It's gonna take a minute. Everyone being their members. Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. I can feel the anticipation in the air, the excitement in your eyes. Hopefully nobody's disappointed. We'll do our best. We're going to start with the presentations from the subcommittees. We're going to go education, health, public safety, and then capital budget pay-go, right? If you're here waiting to see where your capital project is, you're in the wrong place. That happens in a couple weeks. But if you're here for any of those other things, this is the day and the moment. Yes, please. And we will hand out the documents associated with each subcommittee as we begin each of them. Well, they came around to get that.
It was a joke.
I'm gonna have to help you with your material. Okay, let's get started. Senator King, it's all yours.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank the members of the subcommittee, Senator Joanne Benson, Senator Jack Bailey, and Senator Paul Quarterman, and the committee staff, Erica Schisler, who is invaluable, and budget analysts, Natalie Andrade, Sarah Baker, Carrie Cook, Patrick Frank, Emily Haskell, Laura Hyde, Victoria Martinez, Madeline Miller, Kelly Norton, Jacob Polikov, Yashadara Rai, Micah Richards, Samantha Tapia, and Elizabeth Weibel, and Dominic Sinelli, who edited this document. Okay, beginning on page 1, for the Board of Public Works, the subcommittee adopted narrative to publish quarterly reports on monthly attendance at the Maryland Zoo. On page 2, for the Historic St. Mary's City Commission, subcommittee adopted language restricting funds pending the submission of a report on the implementation of audit recommendations. On pages 3 through 5, in the Governor's Office for Children, subcommittee adopted a technical amendment to contingent language and added language withholding funds for a report from contributing agencies. On page 6, for the Maryland Commission for African American History and Culture, the subcommittee reduced funds for a technical correction. On page 7, for the Interagency Commission on School Construction, the subcommittee adopted intent language for the School Safety Grant Program. On pages 8 through 11, for the Department of Information Technology, the committee adopted language restricting funds pending reports on information technology project requests and cybersecurity assessment, reduced funds for turnover, and adopted narrative for reports on managing for results, measure and dedicated cybersecurity funding. On pages 12 and 13, for the Department of General Services, the subcommittee added language restricting funds pending a report on corrective actions related to repeat audit findings and adopted narrative requesting a report on state center relocation. On pages 14 and 15 for the Department of Labor, the subcommittee adopted an action to delete special funds that were included in the budget in error and narrative creating a prison to honest jobs work group. On pages 16 through 19 for the Maryland State Department of Education in the Maryland Center for School Safety, the subcommittee adopted a reduction in special funds for a grant, reduced general funds, and added special funds as a replacement for the School Resource Officer Program. For MSDE headquarters, the subcommittee adopted narrative for reports on accounting practices, state education agency federal stimulus funds, the Maryland Leads Program, and distribution of certain information. On pages 20 through 26 for MSDE aid to education, the subcommittee added language restricting funds pending a report on the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program and a report on free and reduced priced student meal enrollment, and adopted narrative for reports on the non-public placement program, the Autism Waiver Program, PTEC, the Child Care Scholarship Program, and local education agency federal stimulus funds. On pages 27 and 28 for the Accountability and Implementation Board, the subcommittee added language restricting funds for a report on blueprint for Maryland's future implementation. On pages 29 through 32 for the Maryland Higher Education Commission, the subcommittee added language restricting funds pending corrective aid actions related to a recent audit, a report on the impact of credit completion on financial aid awards, and a report on the MHEC financial aid website, and adopted narrative requesting reports on financial aid and progress towards 55% completion goal. On page 33 for MHEC aid to community colleges, the subcommittee adopted narrative for reports on developmental education and tuition waivers and supplemental services. On page 34 for MHEC student financial assistance, the subcommittee adopted narrative for a report on the Next Generation Scholars Program. On pages 35 and 36 for higher education, subcommittee adopted narrative for reports on faculty workload and the calculation of graduate full-time equivalent students. On page 37, for Baltimore City Community College, the subcommittee adopted narrative for a report on the Mayor's Scholars Program. On pages 38 and 39 for Maryland School for the Deaf, the committee added language restricting funds for a report on audit findings and adopted narrative for a report on the kindergarten readiness assessment. On page 40 for the Department of Commerce, the subcommittee added language to reduce personnel expenditures and a technical amendment to contingent language, and adopted narrative on small, women, minority, and veteran-owned businesses. However, upon further consideration, the committee would like to offer a replacement to that item to adjust the agency completing the report. The committee also has additional actions for review. I move adoption of the subcommittee report.
Okay, let's, I know that there are additional pages that I think members would like to offer, but let me ask first, do you have any questions on the subcommittee's initial report? Okay. Senator McCray? Oh, was this on something to offer? Okay, you'll be first. Feel free to offer.
Mr. Chair, in front of you all should be a yellow sheet of paper. It'll be in front of you for aid to education, State Department of Education, just a budget amendment. That I hope I can get a second for.
Second. Proceed.
There's a budget amendment in front of you that restricts $250,000 until an MOU is established with the Baltimore City Public Schools and sent back to the budget committees.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, anybody else? I think everybody has one, it looks like. Okay. Senator Jennings. Why don't you want to talk? Why don't you tell us about it?
This amendment this narrative deals with a study dealing with data stored on state resources, laptops, workstations, and looking at how it's stored both at rest as well as in transport, because we have a lot of PII information out there, major risk, and just making sure that we're meeting the proper data security standards with all that data that's being stored. So I move favorable.
Any questions? Second? All's in favor? Opposed? Okay, anybody else have one? Senator Roosevelt?
Thank you. You'll soon have another piece of yellow paper in front of you. This is adding narrative to the Department of Labor. It's an amendment that I discussed with the chair and discussed with the Department of Labor, and I think we're all on the same page here. It's basically to create a study on skills-based hiring. As I think we all generally know, there's been move over the years, specifically in state government, but among private employers, to broaden their workforce pools by doing a better job of evaluating people's skills in addition to any degrees they may have earned, because many people learn a lot on the job, and that's not reflected in a degree they may have earned 20 years ago. And so this amendment would set up a work group to study that. It's a national movement that's going on, and we want to get Maryland out front in terms of opening up opportunities for people. So that's what the amendment does.
Second?
Thank you.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, anybody else? Senator Zucker?
Thank you very much. I two things. I guess first on page 21, I would ask the subcommittee chair and subcommittee if they would entertain. So right now, the first sentence, it's on the report of the non-public placement program. If they would entertain just to modify that to say the committees are interested in the non-public placement program and strike the other language about concerns.
Do we have a piece of paper on this?
No.
Let's hold for that for a second.
Okay.
Let's get through.
And then I have an item for consideration regarding the Maryland State Department of Education, aid to education. This action would just create a work group to study the pay for education support professionals. It's very similar to we had already provided bonuses for this population, so this is just creating a work group about learning more about parity issues.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, Senator Elfreth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if this was covered, but just in terms of the small minority, women-owned, veteran-owned businesses, moving it from Department of Commerce to Department of to Medco, and I believe being passed out right now. Medco is very interested in conducting this study. It's for our security infrastructure for small minority, women, veteran-owned businesses, and I asked the committee to consider it.
Is there a second? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, anybody else? All right, before we get back to Senator Zucker's amendment, I have one that's just a standard designation of funds related to a particular program that has resided in the budget for a number of years, preservation of cultural arts. And it's just a lineup of where resources would go. Is there a second?
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Senator Zucker, what page were you on again now? 21? Oh, actually, My book is out of sync. I don't know if everybody else is. And so when you're, yeah. I see, at the bottom, non-public, report on non-public placement program.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I just caught it. Obviously, the subcommittee has done just tremendously great work. Just wanted to modify a couple words there.
And what words you're looking at?
So I'm looking at the first sentence and it says, it reads, the committees are concerned about costs for the non-public placement program. And I just would like to modify that. The committees are interested in the non-placement program. Interested in getting more information about that non-placement. I don't believe that there's necessarily an issue with the cost for it. It's just more of, we want to gather information on it.
The non-public.
Does that make sense?
I hear what you're saying. Do you have a thought on this, Madam Chair?
No,
Fine? No, you,
I'm fine with it.
okay. Okay. All's in favor? Opposed? Okay. All right, so as amended now, is there a motion for the subcommittee's report?
Favorable.
All right, any comments? All's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Madam Chair. Great job.
Okay, this concludes our subcommittee report.
Awesome. Great job. Thank you. Health. Senator McCray. Alphabetical.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chairs, members of the committee, and let me first be a privilege to be able to follow something that you said at one time, Mr. Chair. I'd also like to thank my committee members, Senator Shelley Heddleman, Senator J.B. Jennings, and Senator Craig Zucker for the phenomenal work and just being able to have the privilege to work with them this respective year on this committee. I'd also like to thank our committee staff, Mr. Philip Anthony, for always being my wingman, and the budget analysts, Miss Natalie Andrade, Miss Ann Braun, Emily Haskell, Naomi Camaro, who's always by my side and was the respective coordinator this year, Victoria Martinez, Jacob Polikoff, Yashadara Rai, Micah Richards, Samuel Quist, Samantha Tapia, Elizabeth Wabel, and Tanya Zimmerman. And I'd also like to thank Ms. Claire Austin Washburn, who edited this respective report, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, beginning on page 1, the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing, the subcommittee adopted narrative requesting a report on the respective operations of the new State Board of Sign Language Interpreters. On pages 2 and page 3, in the Department of Disabilities, the subcommittee adopted 2 pieces of narrative requesting reports on Universal Services Trust Fund expenditures and efforts to fill vacant positions. Colleagues, on page 4, in the Executive Department Boards, Commissions, and Offices, the subcommittee adopted narrative requesting a report on participation in the Minority Business Enterprise Program. In the Secretary of State, on page 5, the subcommittee adopted narrative requesting a report on 2 vacant positions. On pages 6 and page 7, in the Department of Aging, the subcommittee adopted narrative requesting reports on senior care programs, the Longevity Ready Maryland Initiative, and Prince George's County operations. In the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, on page 8, the subcommittee adopted narrative requesting the agency to include caseload data in its annual Managing for Results submission. On page 9, in the Military Department, the subcommittee adopted 2 pieces of narrative requesting reports on the TRICARE Premium Reimbursement Program implementation and participation, and the Free State Challenge Academy staffing status and its long-term staffing plan. On page 10, in the Maryland Institute for Emergency Medical Services Systems, the subcommittee adopted narrative requesting an update on 4 long-term vacancies. On page 11, in the Maryland Health Benefit Exchange, the subcommittee adopted narrative requesting a report on the reinsurance program cost and forecast, Mr. Chair. On page 12, in the West North Avenue Development Authority, the subcommittee added language restricting funds pending submission of a comprehensive plan and grants manual. Actions pertaining to the State Department of Assessments and Taxation begin on page 13. The subcommittee adopted 3 pieces of language restricting funds pending a report on staffing in the real property valuation program, a report on the IT project cybersecurity needs, and a report on a property assessment notice mailing error. Actions related to the Maryland Department of Health are on pages 17 through page 51. First, on page 17, in the Maryland Department of Health Administration, the subcommittee added language restricting funds pending an update on staffing. Mr. Chair, on pages 18 and 19, the subcommittee adopted 2 pieces of narrative requesting a report on the agency's overdose response and the status of resolving audits finding. In the health professional boards and commissions, on page 20, the subcommittee added language restricting funds for 3 health boards pending a report on their efforts to improve their complaint investigation goal performance. And on page 21, the subcommittee adopted narrative requesting a report on the transfer of Board of Nursing Infrastructure Operations in the Office of the Secretary. Actions related to public health services begin on page 22. The subcommittee added 4 pieces of language restricting funds pending reports on the local health department's funding formula and match requirement, the permit process for physician dispensing of non-controlled dangerous substances, the prenatal and infant care grant program, and the pediatric cancer fund administration. On page 25, the subcommittee reduced $6 million from the Center for Firearm Violence Prevention and Intervention and updated the language making the funds contingent upon legislation passing. The subcommittee also adopted 3 pieces of narrative requesting reports on efforts to fill long-term vacant positions, performance measures related to the effect of adult use cannabis on public health, and the VIP Kids program. Actions related to the Behavioral Health Administration begin on page 30, colleagues. The subcommittee added 2 pieces of language restricting funds pending a report on a recoupment of overpayments to providers and the transition to the new respective ASO, and a report on a non-Medicaid provider reimbursement. The subcommittee also adopted narrative requesting an update on the long-term vacancies. And on page 33, the subcommittee amended contingent language related to the establishment of the associated outpatient treatment programs. On pages 33, 34, and pages 46 and 47, the subcommittee added language restricting funds for provider reimbursement for behavioral health services or transfer among those programs in Medicaid. In the Developmental Disabilities Administration, on page 35 and 36, the subcommittee added 2 pieces of language restricting funds pending reports on advanced payments to providers during their transition to the long-term services and support system and spending data in the system. On pages 36 and 37, the subcommittee also added language restricting funding in the community service programs to that respective use only. Under Medicaid, beginning on page 38, the subcommittee added language restricting funds pending a report on corrective actions for repeat audit findings and added 2 pieces of annual language restricting funding. The subcommittee adopted 8 pieces of narrative requesting reports on community options waiver data, quarterly Medicaid enrollment, recruitment of anesthesiologists, reimbursement of maternal fetal medicine, nursing home participation in Medicaid, long-term care data reporting, school-based behavioral health services, and the end of wait initiatives. On page 45, the subcommittee also reduced general and federal funds as a technical correction to delete double budgeted funds for health insurance. Colleagues, beginning on page 48, in the Health Regulatory Commissions, the subcommittee added language restricting funding pending a report on the implementation of trauma center funding recommendations. However, the subcommittee would like to modify this language as shown on an additional page to add the Maryland Healthcare Commission to the report and modify the respective information request. The subcommittee also adopted 3 pieces of narrative requesting reports on ambulatory surgical facilities, the Maryland Primary Care Program, and the Consortium on Coordinated Community Supports. Subcommittee actions pertaining to the Department of Human Services begin on page 52 with the Department of Human Services Administration. The subcommittees adopted 2 pieces of narrative requesting a report on Maryland Think and an update on vacant positions. On pages 54 through 61, they contain actions pertaining to the Social Services Administration. The subcommittee added 3 pieces of language restricting funds pending reports on action taken to resolve all outstanding repeat audit findings, child welfare caseloads and staffing data, and the planned usage of funds budgeted for foster care provider rate reform. On pages 56 through page 58, the subcommittee also adopted 2 items of committee narrative requesting reports on hospital stays data for children in foster care and the implementation of the Federal Family First Prevention Services Act. The subcommittee added 2 pieces of annual language on pages 59 and 61, colleagues, restricting general funds budgeted for the foster care payments program and child welfare services program for use for that respective purposes only. On pages 60, the subcommittee reduced a portion of the proposed fiscal 2024 general fund deficiency appropriation for the foster care maintenance payments program based on forecasted program spending needs, Mr. Chair. In the assistance payments program, starting on page 61, the subcommittee added language restricting funds in the program to the purpose with limited exceptions and added 2 pieces of language requiring the transfer of administrative funds to an administration program. The subcommittee also reduced general and federal funds based on anticipated program spending and special funds that will not be available. On pages 65 and 66, the subcommittee adopted 2 pieces of committee narrative requesting quarterly reports on application processing and case closures and implementation of the new federal summer EBT program. On pages 67 and 68 in the Child Support Administration, the subcommittee reduced general fund funds and authorized these reduced funds to be replaced by child support reinvestment funds. We adopted narrative requesting performance data and adopted narrative requesting a report on vacancies. In the home energy programs on page 69 through 71, the subcommittee adopted 4 pieces of narrative requesting reports related to application processing, energy assistance, program operations, eligibility requirements, and customer service. Lastly, in the Department of Housing and Community Development, on page 72, the subcommittee deleted funds for operating grants that were double budgeted. There are 4 additional items the subcommittee would like to propose not included in this respective report and shown in the additional pages. First, the subcommittee purposes adding language in the local family investment program to specify the use of the funds for 2 generational model grant and requesting a report on the respective program. Second, the subcommittee proposes adopt a narrative in the Department of Housing and Community Development, requesting information on the designation of just communities. And lastly, the subcommittee proposes adding 2 pieces of language to the Maryland Department of Health Regulatory Commission expressing the General Assembly's intent that the consortium on coordinated community supports procure a referral and data reporting platform, that the Health Services Cost Review Commission and Maryland Institute for Emergency Medical Service Systems continue meeting with the work group on emergency department and hospital throughput. Mr. Chair, move the adoption of the subcommittee report as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Questions for the chairman? Seeing none, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great job. Senator Elfreth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the subcommittee, would like to begin by thanking the members of the PSGE subcommittee, Senators Michael Jackson, Senator Jim Rosepep, Senator Johnny Ray Salling, and of course, our incredible committee staff, Deneen Banks, and our support staff, Brett Ogden, for editing this document. Would finally like to thank our budget analysts, of course, led by the talented Jacob Cash, Carrie Cook, Patrick Frank, Andrew Gray, Victoria Martinez, Steve McCulloch, Madeline Miller, Jacob Polakov, Samuel Quist, Yashahata Ray, Micah Richards, Samantha Tapia, and Elizabeth Weibel. We'll begin on page 1 with the judiciary's budget. The subcommittee reduced funds across the judiciary to align with actual spending, reduced funds that were double budgeted, and reduced funding for the DeWolf v. Richmond implementation to align with actual spending. The subcommittee also restricted funds for implementing DeWolf v. Richmond for that purpose only. Beginning on the bottom of page 2 and continuing to page 4, the subcommittee requested reports on the appointed attorney program, court performance measures, problem-solving courts, major IT projects within the judiciary, the Land Records Improvement Fund, and judgeship needs. Additionally, the subcommittee reduced current year funding for DeWolf v. Richmond implementation to better align with expected spending. Moving on to the Office of the Public Defender on page 5, the subcommittee restricted surplus personnel funds to be used only to increase employee salaries. The subcommittee also requested a report on staffing and caseloads. On page 6, the Office of the Attorney General, the subcommittee requested quarterly reports on the Access to Counsel in Evictions program. On page 7, in the Public Service Commission, the subcommittee requested reports on third-party retail energy suppliers and weather-dependent utility service termination restrictions. On page 8, in the Uninsured Employers Fund, the subcommittee restricted funds pending a report on repeat audit findings and requested a work group be created to address the fund's long-term financial solvency. On page 10, the Maryland Energy Administration, the subcommittee requested that the Strategic Energy Investment Fund accounting data be included in the budget books and requested reports on federal funding and planned uses of special fund balance transfer. Now turning to the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy. On pages 12 and 13, the subcommittee restricted funds pending a report on the Victims of Crime Awards and funding. On page 13, the subcommittee reduced funds by increasing the turnover rate for new positions to the standard 25%. The subcommittee also requested a report on invoice and payment methodology that you can find on pages 13 and 14. On page 14, the subcommittee restricted state aid for police protection enhancement funds pending acknowledgement from law enforcement agencies that employees have completed training on juvenile interrogation requirements. The subcommittee also reduced the state aid for police protection enhancement funding so that funding for police accountability and warrants and absconding grants may be restored by the full committee on page 15. Finally, the subcommittee restricted funds pending receipt of a statutory report by the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board. Moving on to the Maryland Thoroughbred Racetrack Operating Authority, on page 16, the subcommittee adopted narrative requiring quarterly status reports on horse racing facilities. In the Department of Planning, on page 17, the subcommittee restricted a portion of funding for the Maryland 250 Commission to be granted to local Maryland 250 organizations. On page 18, the Maryland Department of Emergency Management, the subcommittee requests reports on the Resilient Maryland Revolving Loan Fund and the state and local cybersecurity grant program. In the Department of Veterans Affairs, you'll find on page 20, the subcommittee requested quarterly reports on Charlotte Hall Veterans Home facility operations, staffing, and federal ratings. The report was first implemented last year. We'd like to continue to see it come to the subcommittee. On page 21, the Maryland Automobile Insurance Fund, the subcommittee restricted quarterly financial reports on the in the insured and uninsured divisions of the funds. On page 22, in the Maryland Insurance Administration, the subcommittee requested 2 reports on the status of the insurance tracking system development project. Page 23, in the Comptroller of Maryland, the subcommittee requested submission of additional managing for results data and a forecast of increased state tax revenues related to staffing and technology upgrades. The subcommittee also reduced double budgeted funds. On page 25, in the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Cannabis Commission, the subcommittee requested submission of managing for results data on cannabis violations. On page 26, the Maryland Lottery and Gaming Control Agency, the subcommittee requested publication of data on sports wagering and a report on problem gambling. Actions pertaining to the Maryland Department of Transportation begin on page 28. The subcommittee added 3 pieces of annual budget language requiring notification of changes to its capital program or capital grants and restricting funds for operating grants to the amount budgeted. On pages 32 and 33, the subcommittee added annual language establishing debt outstanding limits and requiring reports on non-traditional debt. On page 34, the Maryland Port Administration, the subcommittee adopted narrative expressing intent regarding the Howard Street Tunnel project. On page 35, on the Maryland Vehicle Administration, the subcommittee requested reports on improper out-of-state tags and the adequacy of the uninsured motorist fine. Pages 36 and 37 in the Maryland Transit Administration, the subcommittee restricted funds pending a report on local bus service for Baltimore City and requested status reports on the Purple Line project. On pages 38 through 42 in the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, the subcommittee requested the following reports on the Office of Outdoor Recreation, Cultural and Historic Resources, the Merkel Wildlife Sanctuary, participants and conservation easements for the Mentored Hunt Program, Chesapeake Bay restoration spending, the annual 2010 Trust Fund Work Plan, and recreational striped bass. On pages 43 and 44 in the Department of Agriculture, the subcommittee requested reports on Mentored Hunt programs, participants and agricultural easements, value-added agriculture, and blue catfish marketing. Now turning to the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services, beginning on pages 45 through 48, the subcommittee's restricted funds pending a plan to comply with the Public Information Act and restricted funds pending a report on public safety apprenticeships. The subcommittee also requested annual reports on Justice Reinvestment Act savings, recidivism, and program participation data. Additionally, the subcommittee requested notification when the new correctional and pretrial healthcare contracts are ready for Board of Public Works approval. On pages 49 through 54 in the Division of Correction, the subcommittee restricted funds pending quarterly hiring and attrition reports and an overtime strategic plan. The subcommittee also requested reports on racial discrimination, the re-entry passport program, and the treatment of transgender individuals. On pages 55 and 56, in the Division of Parole and Probation, the subcommittee requested reports on case distributions and a new assessment tool. Also in the Police and Correctional Training Commissions on page 57, the subcommittee restricted funds pending a report on police training expenditures and timelines. Moving on to the Maryland Department of the Environment, pages 58 through 61, the subcommittee requested reports on Maryland State Certified sod and the Used Tire Cleanup and Recycling Fund. The subcommittee also restricted funds pending the submission of correct personnel expenditures. Additionally, the subcommittee requested reports on the adequacy of environmental compliance staff and a timeline for developing the environmental accidents text alert system. On page 62 in the Maryland Environmental Service, the subcommittee requested an annual funding statement report. On pages 63 and 64 in the Department of Juvenile Services, the subcommittee restricted funds pending reports on wait times for out-of-home placements and an updated facilities master plan. The subcommittee also requested a report on services for youth and alternatives to detention. On pages 66 through 69 in the Department of State Police, the subcommittee reduced funds across programs that were incorrectly budgeted. The subcommittee also requested quarterly reports on permitting applications and a report on forensic laboratories. Additionally, the subcommittee restricted funds for the annual uniform crime report on pages 70 and 71. Finally, the subcommittee would like to amend the report by adding 2 additional pieces of budget bill language for the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy. I believe that is in the green packet on your desks. The first piece redirects justice reinvestment savings contingent on the creation of the Office of the Correctional Ombudsman, a new independent unit of state government. The second piece restricts grant funding for the Baltimore City Safe Streets program, grant pending a staffing report, and proof that a site director for the Bel Air Edison site has been hired. Mr. Chair, I believe the PSGE subcommittee has 46 budgets in total, and that is the completion of our work. I move the subcommittee's report as amended.
Questions for the chair? Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much. Great job.
Yeah.
Yes.
On the end of my budget, I did not find any place for me to thank Laura Hyde, and I enjoyed working with her so much, and she did such a great job that she has to be thanked too.
Very good. Very good. Yes.
I'd like to thank everybody again too. I also missed the part in my report.
You think, okay.
I have a blue sheet for the health regulatory commissions that is.
It was already on our desk.
That
right?
was already on your desk that I'd just like to put forward if that's okay.
That would be fine.
All right.
You want to describe it real quick?
Describe it. This is a budget amendment for the health regulatory commissions, restricting it for 125 in reference to our respective trauma centers and just the audit from that standpoint, Mr. Chair.
Very good.
Thank you.
All those in favor of that being amended to their report? Aye. Opposed? Very good. Senator Zucker. So the smallest report. Rebecca.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Just as a reminder, this is not the bond bills or the miscellaneous part of the budget. First, let me thank Vice Chair McCray and other members of the subcommittee, Senator Quarterman, Elfreth, Jennings, King, and Rosapep. Obviously, we can't do anything without our incredible staff and teammates, Deneen Banks and Carrie Cook, Andrew Gray, Emily Haskell, Laura Hyde, Yashadora Rai, and Katie Cannon, who edited this document. Turning to the actions of the subcommittee, please turn to page 1 regarding interagency commission on school construction. The subcommittee modified the fiscal 24 general fund PAYGO appropriation for the school construction revolving loan fund by 20 million on page 2 in the Department of Housing and Community Development. The subcommittee adopted committee narrative regarding a report on the broadband infrastructure expansion. That concludes the subcommittee report. I move adoption of the subcommittee report.
Any questions for the chair? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Well, good job. All right. So we're gonna move on to the full committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You should have 3 packages on your desks. You should have the main decision document, the large white package. You should have a smaller number of pages, the BRFA tally sheet. And then you should have the purple or lilac additional pages package on your desk as well, or I believe they're coming around right now.
The purple is coming. Lilac,
Lilac.
excuse my ignorance.
And we will go in decision document order. And some analysts have items in both, in all 3 packages. And so we might jump around a little bit, but we'll do our best to direct you to where you need to be. And we'll start out with payments to civil divisions of the state.
On page 1, payments to civil divisions of the state, DLS recommends a committee narrative on disparity grant amount calculation after adopting bracket-based income tax rates beginning tax year 2023. The agency concurs.
Move to adopt.
So as we go through this, the vice chair is going to be making motions on sections, and unless there is an objection, I'm just going to keep moving. We won't be voting on each of those. Okay.
Page 2? Yes.
On page 2 is the budget for the Maryland General Assembly. The recommendation was to concur with the Legislative Policy Committee. The agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
So afraid you lost that one. That would have been trouble.
On page 3 for the Interagency Commission on School Construction Capital Appropriation, this action is related to item 3 on page 1 of the BRFA tally sheet and includes a technical change to strike contingent language. The agency concurred.
Move to adopt the language and to adopt BRFA number 3 and technical change to strike the contingent language.
On page 4, State Board of Elections, DLS recommends committee narrative on quarterly reports on all major IT projects. The agency concurs.
Move to adopt.
Items belonging to the Department of Budget and Management, Office of the Secretary, begin on page 5 of the decision document. The first DLS recommendation restricts funds pending a report on unencumbered balances in the state fiscal relief fund programs. The agency agreed.
Move to adopt.
The second DLS recommendation requests that performance measures be developed by the Audit and Finance Compliance Unit. The agency agreed.
Move to adopt.
The third DLS recommendation is found on page 6 and strikes language that would eliminate the requirement to print budget books. There's a corresponding item on page 3 of the BRFA tally sheet. So if you adopt one, you would want to adopt both, and the agency agreed.
Move to adopt both.
The fourth DLS recommendation starts on page 6 of the decision document and requests the budget details be submitted on contracts and grants. The agency agreed.
Move to adopt.
Item number 5 for DBM Secretary starts on page 7 and continues on through page 8. This amends the budget bill as submitted to limit items allowed to be placed in contingency reserve to those items restricted by the General Assembly only. The agency disagreed with this limitation of executive power.
Move to adopt.
Item number 6 begins on page 8 and amends the budget bill as submitted to add a tracking structure necessary for legislative audits and to disallow transfers of restricted funds for other purposes. I should note that the action on your packet appears incorrectly, and the DLS recommendation should have struck the sentence that says The expenditure or transfer of these funds for other purposes requires the prior approval of the Secretary of Budget and Management. So the DLS recommendation would have that struck. The agency disagreed with this limitation.
Move to adopt.
Item number 7 for DBM begins on page 9, continues on through page 10. This item is a new recommendation to authorize transfer of rainy day funds to cover anticipated entitlement shortfalls. The agency agreed.
Move to adopt.
So that's
Adam-
the one that everybody has heard about from the Medicaid budget. And that's how we are dealing with that situation by providing the authority to reach into the rainy day fund to cover anything as it may occur.
Great. Item number 8 on page 11 of the decision document is an annual recommendation to require long-term executive forecasts, and the agency agreed.
Move to adopt.
Item number 9 on page 12 applies across-the-board reductions to institutions of higher education, and the agency agreed.
Move to adopt.
Item number 10 requires annual reporting of federal funds received by the state, and the agency agreed.
Move to adopt.
Item number 11 on pages 13 and 14 defines policies under which federal funds may be used in the budget. The agency agreed.
Move to adopt.
Item number 12 begins on page 14 and continues on through page 16. This requires state agency budget data and organizational charts to be presented consistently, and the agency agreed.
Move to adopt.
Item number 13 begins on page 16 and continues on through page 18. This requires reporting on and approval of interagency agreements, and the agency agreed.
Move to adopt.
Item number 14 begins on page 18 and continues on through page 21. This language defines the budget amendment process, and the agency agreed.
Move to adopt.
Item number 15 begins on page 21 through 23. And this language requires the maintenance of accounting systems for certain purposes. The agency agreed.
Move to adopt.
Item number 16, the last DLS recommendation for this budget, begins on page 23 and requires notification when a state agency applies for a federal grant with a state match. And it requires DBM to submit quarterly reports submitting all competitive grant applications. The agency agreed.
Move to adopt.
I'd also like to bring your attention to page 1 of the purple packet of additional pages.
Purple bag.
This action,
Take it over for just 1 second. I don't think we got them up here.
oh,
I think Craig needs one to sign that. Okay.
so in this purple packet, the first page, this continues the requirement for state agencies with cybersecurity related repeat audit findings to report their progress on their remediation plans to the state chief information security officer, as well as the Office of Legislative Audits.
Move to adopt.
All right, back in your main decision packet document, on page 25 for the Department of Budget and Management Personnel Budget. Item number 1 on page 25, DLS recommends increasing the turnover expectancy for a new position to 25% for a $36,000 reduction. Agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
Item number 2 is annual committee narrative requesting a report on health insurance account closeout information. The agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
Item 3 on page 26 is annual committee narrative requesting quarterly prescription, medical and dental plan performance. The agency concurred.
Move to reject.
Adopt.
I'm sorry, adopt. You got it. Adopt. Wrong page.
Item number 27, or I'm sorry, page 27, item number 4, DLS recommended restricting funds for the purpose of providing a salary increase for employees employed since June 30, 2019 or longer to instead be used for a general salary increase. The agency disagreed.
Move to reject.
Item number 5 on page 27, DLS recommended reducing the funding for the supplemental pension contribution. You would also want to take a look at items 106 on the Burfa tally sheet. That is almost all the way at the end here on page 7 of your Burfa tally sheet. Item 106, administration alternative would reduce the required retirement reinvestment contribution from 75 million to $50 million annually. Item 106 DLS additional would make the same adjustment, but also include another provision repealing the requirement to reduce pension contributions by the amount of certain administrative fees.
Everybody know where we are. We're on page 7, correct?
Correct.
And we're on item,
106 administration and 106 DLS additional.
okay. Last,
So I move to adopt in the basic document, and then also adopt the Burfa 106 and reject 106 administration.
okay,
On page 28. Item number 6, DLS recommends reducing funding to reflect anticipated vacancy savings in the executive branch agencies, resulting in a budgeted turnover rate of 8.6%. The agency disagreed.
Move to adopt.
Item number 7, still on page 28, DLS recommended deleting funding for the fiscal 2025 annual salary review. The agency disagreed.
Move to reject.
This next section begins some annual budget language that is included in the bill. Item number 8 requires a report regarding abolished positions, and the agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
Item number 9 requires reporting from the Injured Workers Insurance Fund. The agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
Item number 10 on page 29 is language defining the ability of the administration to add positions and limits that to no more than 100 positions, depending on certain circumstances. The agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
Item number 11 begins on page 31. This is the annual back of the bill language requiring reporting on authorized positions in the budget. The agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
Item number 12 on page 32 is annual language requiring reporting on health insurance receipts and spending, and the agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
I would then turn your attention back to the purple pages, page 2 of the package. Still in the Department of Budget and Management, personnel. Page 2, this is a request for some committee narrative regarding reporting on an update on the recommendations made by the Modernization of State Personnel System Task Force.
Move to adopt.
On page 3, this is language that would restrict funds pending a report on the administration's compliance with the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act.
Move to adopt.
All right, back to the main decision document for just a moment. On page 34 in the State Retirement Agency, DLS recommended budget language that would reduce special funds by $8.9 million because they are double budgeted in other agency budgets, and the agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
I also have an additional page for the retirement agency in your purple package, page 4. This is requesting a committee narrative requesting a report on the impact of different types of catastrophic injuries on law enforcement officers' pension benefits.
Move to adopt.
Then on back in the decision document, page 35, Maryland Supplemental Retirement Plans, DLS recommends concurring with the allowance. The agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
The Department of Service and Civic Innovation appears on pages 36 and 37 of the white decision document. There were 5 DLS recommendations. The first was to increase turnover expectancy for new positions to 25%. The agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
The second was to reduce the general fund appropriation for the Maryland Corps program to a level consistent with expected Maryland service year pathway participation. The agency disagreed.
Move to reject.
The third was to reduce the general fund appropriation for education and training contracts. The amount was overstated as a result of a technical error. The agency disagreed and provided another use for the funds in its written testimony.
Move to reject.
Item 4 is another action to increase turnover expectancy for new positions to the standard 25%.
Move to adopt.
Item 5 on page 37 relates to item number 2 in that it reduces the general fund appropriation for the Maryland Core Program to a level consistent with the expected service year option pathway participation. The agency disagreed.
Move to reject.
I'll also draw your attention to pages 5 and 6 of the purple packet. The narrative that appears on page 5 would require a report on state or local government agencies with core participants who've been employed from the first cohort.
Move to adopt.
The second piece of narrative would require a report on the wage subsidization associated with the Maryland Core Program.
Move to adopt.
On page 38 is one item for the State Highway Administration related to the BRFA. So if you look on page 4 of the BRFA tally sheet, items 23 and 23 BLS. On the decision document, if you adopted the recommendation, you would want to adopt recommendation DLS 23 alt. What the 23 and the BRFA does, first, that's the administration's proposal that for 2026 and 2027, the rate for the local highway user be set at the base rate of 15.6% instead of going to 20% in current law. The DLS recommendation was to actually take the local rate back to the pre-2020 rate of 9.6, which would result in the decision document reduction that you see. So
Move to reject and also adopt BRFA number 23 and reject BRFA number 23 DLS alternate.
Page 39 is the Department of Natural Resources. The one recommendation there is to reduce by $6.7 million in general funds, the funding for the Maryland Park Service and Forest Service contingent on a budget reconciliation and financing act provision shown on page 7. This is 107 DLS additional. This would authorize the use of the same amount of money in special funds and program open space balance to be used for the same purpose. There'd be no change in the overall amount of funding, just the color of the money.
Move to adopt and also adopt BRFA 107 DLS additional.
On page 40 for the Behavioral Health Administration, DLS recommended adding language making $5 million included in the allowance from the Senior Prescription Drug Assistance Program contingent upon the enactment of the BRFA. In addition, you'll want to reference page 7 on the BRFA tally sheet. The top 2 items there, the first is 101 administrative alternative, which would permanently expand allowable uses of this fund to include the kidney disease program and behavioral health services for uninsured individuals. And then the one just below that, 101, the DLS additional, it would authorize the use of this funding for behavioral health services only in fiscal 2025.
Move to adopt and also adopt BRFA 101 administrative alternative and reject BRFA 101 DLS alt addition.
On page 41 of the decision document, this covers 2 items in Medicaid. They're both technical corrections that relate to a BRFA item. And so on that tally sheet, it'll be page 5. Item 31, the BRFA action would authorize the transfer of about $200,000 in special funds to Medicaid. And so what the technical corrections are doing is it amends the general fund contingent language to apply to what's happening in the BRFA. The agency concurred. And then the second item would strike the federal fund contingent language on the federal fund appropriation, because this is supposed to be, that was an error. It was supposed to be transferring special funds, and the agency concurred.
Move to adopt the first, move to adopt the second, and also adopt BRFA number 31.
On page 42, so this is the MSDE funding for educational organizations. All 4 actions in this budget code restore language from fiscal 2024 budget bill. Item number 1 is for the Aid to Non-Public Schools program, modifying the distribution of funding, and the agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
Item number 2 on the bottom of page 42. This is specifies participation requirements for the program, the Aid to Non-Public Schools program, and the agency disagreed.
Move to adopt.
Turning to page 43 and 44, item number 3, this specifies non-discrimination requirements for the aided non-public schools program, and the agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
Then moving to page 44, this is item 4 on pages 44 through 46. These are for the Boost program, and this language provides a certain award amount for special education students and specifies reporting requirements. The agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
Next up is the Department of Housing and Community Development on page 47. This item relates to item 9 on the BRFA tally sheet. That's at the top of page 2. That provision would alter the mandate for the Business Facade Improvement Program to allow the use of bonds to fulfill the mandate. Back in the main decision packet on 47, the budget includes $5 million in general funds that are contingently reduced by the BRFA, and DLS recommends deleting those funds. The program is fully funded with general obligation bonds. If you would adopt this, you would also want to adopt a technical amendment to strike the contingent language. The agency concurred.
Move to adopt and also adopt technical correction to strike the contingent language and adopt BRFA number 9.
The public debt is on page 48. The DLS's recommendation is to concur with the allowance. Agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
On page 49 in the State Reserve Fund, item number 1 would is recommending striking language that's not needed to take a cut directly, and the agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
Item number 2 is the reduction of $495 million of an appropriation to the rainy day fund, and the agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
Item number 3 is striking language that's not needed to take the cut directly for the OPEB sweeper and the pension sweeper. The agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
Item number 4 strikes is a technical correction, again, to strike unnecessary language to take reductions directly, and the agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
On page 50, item number 5, again, this is technical correction to strike language not necessary to take the cut directly.
Move to adopt.
Item number 6 is the cut that I've just been talking about, $25 million reduction to the appropriation to the other post-employment benefits sweeper contribution. The agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
Item number 7 is a $25 million recommendation to reduce the $25 million funding for the pension sweeper. The agency concurred. And then if associated with all of those actions, BRFA items 17, 18, and 19, you would want to reject to be consistent with all the actions that you've just taken.
Move to adopt and also reject BRFA number 17, 18, and 19.
Item number 8 at the bottom of page 50, DLS is recommending language that makes the $5 million appropriation in the dedicated purpose account for planning and demolition purposes at the State Center complex contingent on reporting about how the funds will be used.
Move to adopt.
At the bottom of page 51, item number 9, DLS is recommending item number 9 is recommending adding language to the budget that makes a transfer of CEF funds contingent on passage of the BRFA. And then I would also refer you to items 33 and 33 alternative in the BRFA package. That is on page 6 of the BRFA tally sheet. Item 33 is the bill as introduced, authorizes the transfer of $90 million from CEF to the dedicated purpose account to support implementation of the Climate Solutions Now Act. DLS's alternative specifies that the specific ways and accounts that the CEF funds can be transferred.
Move to adopt and also address BRFA items 33 and 33 DLS alternate.
In the BRFA package on page 6 of the BRFA tally sheet, item 33 is the bill as introduced, and DLS 33 alternative is the DLS's proposed alternative.
I thought I just moved on those.
We're on the BRFA tally sheet now,
Right.
page 6.
Right. And so.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
And then on the final page of the decision document, page 52, item 10, DLS is recommending a $9.4 million reduction to the catastrophic event account, and the agency disagreed.
Move to adopt.
That completes your work in the decision document. We still have to go through a couple more pages in the additional packages and the remainder of the BRFA items. Page 7 of the color package and still in the state reserve fund. This is additional language that would reduce funding in the fiscal 2024 appropriation to the dedicated purpose account for cybersecurity purposes by $4 million. And then add those funds back for specified purposes that you see here. The $3 million would be for completing a statewide asset inventory and determining metrics for cybersecurity response performance and other measurements. And then the $1 million would be for the purpose of information security officers and other resources to assist the director of local cybersecurity.
Move to adopt.
All right, we'll go back to the BRFA tally sheet, starting from the beginning. Item number 1 on page 1. Item number 1 on page 1 would eliminate the mandate for the Maryland Native Plants Program. And this results in a $100,000 reduction.
Move to adopt.
Item number 2 in the Office of the Attorney General, this provision would eliminate a mandate for the Consumer Protection Division and authorize special funds to be used to support the division.
Move to modify to apply to only FY 2025.
We have already addressed item number 3. So item number 4, this provision would alter the allowable uses of blueprint funds provided for coordinated community supports through CHRC.
Move to reject.
Item number 5, this provision would remove the prohibition on implementing a freeze in the child care scholarship program enrollment. And there's also an additional page to consider along with this, page 8 of your color package. This on page 8, this is an amendment to that BRFA provision that would require a 60-day notice prior to the implementation of a freeze in the child care scholarship program.
I would move the purple or lilac page to modify to adopt the language requiring the 60-day notification.
Item number 6, still on page 1 of the BRFA tally sheet. This provision applies to the CADE formula in MHEC. The provision would alter the formula to change the enrollment calculation and remove hold harmless provisions and reduce the percent of FTEs from 29% to 26.5%. There is an additional page to consider here as well. On page 9 of your additional packages, there are actually 3 items to consider on page 9. The first would amend the appropriation for the Sellinger program. The second would strike language to the general fund appropriation that's not necessary. And then the third is a technical amendment that
We
strikes.
skipped it.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I think
I'm
we
sorry.
skipped Cade.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm talking about Sellinger when I should be talking about Cade, right?
I don't think there's a page for Cade.
That's
Page 11.
page 11. Sorry about
Okay.
that. Yep, sorry, I got Cage and Sellinger out of order here. So the provision as introduced would alter the formula to reduce the funding from 29% to 26.5%. The additional page on page 11 would would provide an alternative for you to consider.
I move the modification on page 11.
Right, and that puts it at 27.2.
Correct. Item number 7 on page 1 of the BRFA tally sheet. This is the Sellinger formula. This provision would alter the funding formula to count only undergraduate students in the FTEs count for institutions. And then this is the provisions that I was just mentioning on page 9. Amending the appropriation, striking some language on the general fund appropriation and language that would alter the allocation to the various institutions based on the changes to the formula.
I'd move to modify instead to reduce the percentage of FTEs to 16.5% and also adopt the additional page.
16.6.
15.6, you're right.
Item number 8 at the bottom of page 1, this provision would remove a prohibition on DDA setting a dollar cap for self-directed services.
Move to adopt.
No.
Good catch. Move too fast.
You've already addressed item number 9. Item number 10, this provision would eliminate a mandate in DNR, would eliminate a mandated appropriation into the Fisheries Research and Development Fund in fiscal 25 only.
Move to adopt.
Item number 11, also in the DNR, would reduce a mandate for the Mel Nolan Woodland Incentives and Fellowship Fund.
Move to adopt.
Item number 12 in DNR would allow funds from the Chesapeake and Coastal Bays 2010 Trust Fund to satisfy a mandate for Tree Solutions Now Act of 2021. And there's also a related an administrative alternative, item number 12, that would just clarify the intent of that provision.
Move to adopt.
Item number 13 and GOCPP, this provision would reduce a mandate for warrants and absconding grants.
Move to adopt.
No.
No, to reject. I'm sorry. You got it.
Item number 14, this provision would reduce the amount of funds reserved due to the revenue volatility cap under the adjustment in fiscal 25 and 26 only. There's a related provision at the top of page 3 that would adjust the revenue adjustment to 0 in both fiscal 2024 and 25 and adjust it to 100 million in fiscal 2026.
So move to reject 14 and to modify 15.
And the modification and
Does it say, I'm saying same modification, it's part of the same one, it's number 14,
yes,
the modification, yes.
and the modification to make the changes
24 and 25.
item number 15.
So, and
I'm
that's
sorry.
just so everyone knows, that's, everyone has talked about, or heard about the write down we received yesterday. This covers a big chunk of that.
Item number 15 on page 3, this provision would redirect interest from a variety of special funds.
Move to adopt.
You've already discussed items 16 through 19, so down to item 20 and on page 3, this provision would reduce lottery agent commission for sales from 6 to 5.5% and the commission for the cashing of winning tickets from 3 to 2%.
Move to modify to reduce commission on sales from 6 to 7.75. 5.75, 5.75. Yep, good point.
Item number 21 in MDOT would the BRFA as introduced would modify the required state of good repair funding for MTA in fiscal 2025. There's a DLS alternative that would strike the provision to modify the required state of good repair funding in fiscal 2025 only.
Move to reject.
You're gonna reject 21 and
Rejecting 21.
yeah, and accept DLS alternative 21.
I move the alternative 21.
Yeah, that one we're adopting.
Move to adopt it.
Yeah, great, perfect.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Item number 22 at the top of page 4. This provision would eliminate the requirement that MTA purchase only zero emission buses and instead require that at least 25% of the purchases be zero emission.
Move to adopt.
You've already addressed the 223 items. Item 24 in MDOT would eliminate the requirement for registration stickers on license plates.
Move to reject.
Item number 25 in public broadcasting would eliminate the mandate to provide prior year general fund appropriation plus general fund growth and additional general funds.
Move to reject.
Item number 26 would repeal the small business relief tax credit.
Move to adopt.
Item number 27 would authorize a transfer of $40 million from the state unemployment insurance reserve account to the general fund in fiscal 2025. The administration proposed an alternative of transferring $60 million instead.
Adopt transfer of 60 million.
Item number 28 would authorize a transfer of $5.74 million from the Resilient Maryland Revolving Loan Fund to the general fund.
Reject.
Item number 29 would authorize a transfer of $5 million from the Pediatric Cancer Fund to the general fund.
Move to reject.
Item number 30 in the Department of Health, this provision would authorize the use of special fund balances from various state health boards to be used for programs in BHA. I would direct your attention to page 12 of your color package with some potential alternatives for you to consider.
Move to modify with the additional page to lower transfers to two board balances and alter contingent reductions.
And this option reduces the amount of the reduction and reallocates where the reduction is coming from. On to page 5, item 31 has already been addressed. Item 32 of the Burford tally sheet, this would authorize a transfer of nearly $194 million from the dedicated purpose account to the general fund in fiscal 2025, including funds from cybersecurity and PAYGO projects. The administration proposed associated with this to alter the amounts transferred to remove 0.35 million from one purpose and 151,000 from another purpose.
A modify to adopt all except the transfer of the 0.35 million to miscellaneous expenses.
And then to be consistent, you would want to reject.
Oh, I'm trying to reject your
Alternative, yeah.
Reject the alternative, yep.
On page 6, you've already addressed item 33, and that brings us to the bottom of page 6, which is 100 DLS alternative. This provision would authorize a transfer of $25 million from the dedicated purpose account for facilities renewal at state parks.
Modify to transfer 14 million.
At the top of page 7, you've already addressed the 101 items. Item 102, DLS additional would clarify how FTEs are to be calculated for the selected public four-year institutions in the Cade, Selinger, and Baltimore City Community College formulas.
Modify to use the most recent FTAs on a credit hour basis and expenditures in all formulas.
Item 103, DLS additional, this would authorize a transfer of $7.5 million in unspent funds from the dedicated purpose account that were originally intended to support hospitals, assisted living facilities, and nursing homes. These funds were not able to be spent by the agencies.
Move to adopt.
Item 104, DLS additional would authorize a transfer of $4.5 million from the dedicated purpose account that was originally intended for use in the learning and extended academic program that was not able to be used.
Move to adopt.
Item 105, DLS additional specifies that the $10 million distribution to the local income tax reserve account from fiscal 2026 through 2060 is being used to repay a transfer of $350 million to the Education Trust Fund.
Move to adopt.
You've already discussed the final two items on page 7.
Okay, sorry about that. Where are we now?
You're on the final page of the Burford tally sheet. At the top of page 8, item 108 DLS additional. This recommendation would reduce pay-go funding from fiscal 2022 for demolition of the Bard building by $2 million.
Move to adopt.
Item 200 administration additional would expand the allowable uses of fiscal 2024 pay-as-you-go miscellaneous capital to the Living Classrooms Foundation.
Move to adopt.
Okay.
You completed with the Burford tally sheet. There are a few more additional items to consider in the purple package on page 14. This is an addition. This is an additional action in the BRFA that would allow for the transfer of $150 million from the local income tax reserve account to the general fund.
Move to adopt.
And then the last item I'll discuss is on page 15. This is a technical amendment for fiscal 2024 funds and planning to direct the grantee for some funding.
Move to adopt.
Okay. Thank you. Yes.
Go back to page 7. I want to put 7 of 101 at the top of page of 101, having to do with the prescriptive drug assistance program. What position did we take on that?
In the decision document.
We adopted that. You're talking about number at the very top of 7. On the 101, right? Right. want to jump in?
You adopted the administration alternative that permanently expands the uses of the Senior Prescription Drug Assistance Program Fund.
Expands the usage.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, that is not the state retiree program for state retirees.
Thank you for clarifying that for me. Thank you. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Are we gonna, you're gonna move on to the ad?
Yep, I think they're gonna pass out the list.
The ad sheets. Let me just say, actually, what I wanted to point out in the middle of some of the BRFA decisions, there have been discussions that have been going on between the House and the Senate for several weeks
Thank
now. And for instance, there are things that we have agreed to already and sort of shared the costs. It may have just reflected in ours, but will already be set for the next round. For instance, the CADE decision was one that we agreed on together. And there are many, and Mr. Romans is going to present this next sheet, and there I'll point out several on here where we've already come to agreement together with the House. Mr. Romans.
Yeah, I'll be brief. So what's been handed out is a list of adds to the budget, Senate adds, the total 223.6 million, 219.4 million of general funds and 4.2 million of special funds. There's a combination of adds to both fiscal 24 as well as fiscal 25. Most of them are in 25. I mean, you can obviously look through the list yourselves. I would highlight two things. At the very top of page 1, there's 110 million of money for various housing programs that is in the GO program that's being moved from GO to operating, which will free up capacity in the GO. If you look on page 3, there's additional 20 million being moved in fiscal 24. So a total of about 130.4 million of capital budget money is moving from the capital budget to the operating budget, which will create capacity for the House and Senate in the capital budget. The other thing I would note about this list is the second item on page 1. It provides 21 million of general funds to fully fund state's debt service. As you know, our analysis showed that there was an underfunding of the debt service that we're required to pay in fiscal 25. And this provides the appropriate level of funding to meet our obligations. And then there's a long list, as you can see, of various other priorities of the committee addressing a number of issues. Yeah, I can go through them if you want, or
not. No, I don't think it's necessary. I think I just wanted to highlight, as I said, in cooperation with the House, a number of things. First off, of course, we both recognize the importance of dealing with debt service. We are together on the legal services issue and the detention monitoring. We're working with the comptroller on the fraud detection. Fully funding the funding the I guess it is fully funding the formula on the sexual assault and rape centers, the library resource center. So there's a number of things, I won't go through everything in here, that we've already come to agreement on and are working, and you'll see them here, and you wouldn't necessarily see them in the House's budget because we put the full amount in this side to begin with. So but it's continues the cooperation that we have with them, and we'll do the rest in conference.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just add the plan you've walked through, today would leave you in good stead with the Spending Affordability Committee guidelines. You'd have a fund balance of roughly 140 million in general funds, and you would be well within the structural budget threshold the Spending Affordability Committee set.
So, given everything that has happened, and we've had some setbacks while we've been here, we still find ourselves in this position where we've exceeded both by a fair amount, our cash balance as well as the structural. So we were able to pull that off. Pretty proud of what the committee has done.
Chairman.
Job to all of you. So with that, I would move favorable with amendment for Senate Bill 360.
Second.
Which is the budget bill. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And then I'll move favorable with amendment, Senate Bill 362.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations, everyone. Good job. Appreciate everybody's hard work. You gonna take this floor? I'd be happy to let you take it to the floor, Senator. Committee, we are going to shut down for about 5 minutes, and then we will begin with a short voting session. Thank you all. Thank you to the staff. Thank you to DLS. We could not do this without you. Thank you to the team here with that are here, Philip and Deneen and Erica. And all support staff, Kim. And your team. Thank you all very much. I'll do it. All right, we're gonna start back up again, and we're gonna need folks to either sit down or step out. Excellent.
Buy your sexy glasses.
Oh, nice. Let's see. All right.
Consent calendar?
No, I know you love consent calendar, but it's not consent
All
calendar.
right.
Vicky is the one who's gonna explain this because she worked it downstairs.
Okay.
We've already got a couple of them.
Yep. All right, we're gonna start with Senate Bill 982. And we are second on this. Okay, this is down in Tripoli. And Gruber evidently worked this downstairs. So she has made it upstairs and she's gonna tell us all about it,
My old stomping grounds.
right?
So the bill, and particularly as it relates to B&T, it came in and the initial fiscal note was over $90 million. I did my B&T magic and it is now down to about $2.2 million. And I'll explain how that happened. As amended, the bill clarifies the intent of the General Assembly, which this always was the intent of the General Assembly, that oversight of IT projects be centralized at Do It. And so it makes that clear. The Major Information Technology Development Fund is renamed to an Information Technology Investment Fund, ITIF. And there's a provision in the bill that sets aside 20% of the ITIF monies, the newly named ITIF monies, to be used for expedited projects. And the theory is here that doing projects as we have been doing since we established the fund in 2002, and I hate to age myself, but I worked on that bill way back when. We're doing these massive projects, and the ability to do things incrementally and in phases has been hindered by something in the administrative burden of doing it as a major information technology project. So the hope is by having some projects that can be done in an expedited manner, they don't have to go through the whole long multiple year process to become a major project and be named in the budget, that we can get some of these incremental, particularly modernization projects related to cybersecurity, that those could be done. It clarifies that technology that's reoccurring standard operating technology is not considered a major information technology project. This would be something like Network Maryland. Do It raised the issue during some work groups that we had that it really didn't make sense to call that a major project when it's standard reoccurring technology. The secretary is authorized to fund both major projects and expedited projects through the new fund, the newly named fund. And it also establishes, this came up in one of the work groups, was giving the secretary the ability to use the fund as a revolving loan with either state agencies, maybe even local governments at some point in the future. So the bill authorizes the secretary to set up a revolving loan process. The secretary is required to establish a process working with state agencies that allows the units of state government to apply for these expedited funds. The ability to apply will be open twice a year. Agencies can apply, and then the department will prioritize what needs to be done first, and then go ahead and move forward with those projects. One thing that you did identify in the budget is if you remember, you set aside out of the dedicated purpose account $3 million for a number of studies, and then another $1 million for local CIOs to be able to use for cyber initiatives. Within the $3 million, it actually identified one of the things that's in this bill, which is that Do It will inventory and assess all the state's legacy systems And then after doing that, they're going to do what is essentially a 5-year program of what it would cost to resolve all of the legacy systems in the state. So it'd be sort of like it's not going to be funded, but they're setting out what would sort of be like a CIP for these projects. The department is also, one of the concerns of the industry is that our procurement process is very slow. The bill is introduced, exempted these projects from both Board of Public Works approval, but also from the procurement process. The bill no longer does that. It instead allows for expedited approval in terms of being put on the BPW agenda when something is ready. But then it requires that a study be performed about our information technology procurement process to look at ways that it could be done in a more responsive and more rapid manner. I don't know if you remember from 2022, but there was a modernized Maryland Oversight Commission that had very strict provisions about what had to be done when, and the Oversight Commission was sort of directing what work was going to be done. That group is changed in the bill to be a best practices advisory group, and it's consisting of 5 members of state government, including the secretary, the state Cisco, a number of state CIOs, and then also 5 private sector individuals, all appointed by the governor. Do It has agreed. They had not agreed before, but they have agreed to chair the commission and staff it in consultation with DLS. So we joined the team, and I think that helped mediate the disagreements. There's uncodified language that asks Do It to develop a state modernization plan, but also to look at positions in Do It that may be suitable for either independent salary setting authority or greater flexibility in position classifications, and particularly looking at the ability to recruit and retain employees to meet their mission, because that has been a challenge for them. And then finally, there's language, and this was an interesting thing that really hasn't been talked about a lot in state government. And I, in doing research, recommended this to the committee, and they thought it was appropriate. But when we talk about modernization plans and putting in new systems, we don't really think about the need to train and uptrain existing employees to fully utilize the technology. And so it also adds to modernization plans that they include a plan to train and uptrain existing employees to be able to fully utilize the technology. So with that, the bill finally creates 2 positions, with 1 position to the new expedited process to essentially manage that and help with the awards twice a year. And then a grants administrator to aggressively seek all federal or private sector grants that could help offset state costs for various IT projects. So with that, the bill went from 90 some million to 2.2 million. 1 million is, as I mentioned, for the inventory and assessment of legacy systems that's already addressed in the budget that you passed today. The second is the procurement study. Do It estimated that would be $1 million. There hasn't been a source of funding identified for that study. And third is the 2 pins. Those, have not identified a source for funding. So that would be a mandate of approximately $200,000 next year in fiscal 2026. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Gruber? Well, if you were involved, we know it's been thorough. Thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you. Let's do 1077.
Okay, you have a reprint on your desk for Senate Bill 1077. This one has to do with existing funding for the school safety expenditures. For the fund that has to do, all the changes of the bill are on page 3. So this is for the Safe Schools Fund. Currently, the mandated amount is for $10 million. As introduced, the bill would have increased it to 15 million in 2026 and then 20 million in 2027. The amendments from the sponsor changed the calculation of the distribution of that back to current law, which is based on schools. And then finally, the bill expanded the use of the funds to include school security employees. And then the chair wanted me to change shall to a may, so that's hand marked in there.
There's another May.
There is another shall, and I need to change the lines in 2 and 3 and yes, no, thank you. I I did miss that one.
It's refreshing, Senator, refreshing.
And then I'll need to rejigger lines 2 and 3 to keep the 10 million. Otherwise that would end in 2025 without by turning it into a May for the out years.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. So I think I mean, I understand the bill, but I think I understand that we're making sure that these funds stay where they belong in the school safety programs. And is there, who makes so is the local systems that will, if the local systems don't expend the dollars that they have, then they the dollars revert back. So is there an assessment or an annual? So who makes the determination? So we have the entire fund, the dollars aren't expended, they go back in. So what happens then?
So the fund would be a special fund, which means that they stay there.
Would it remain a special fund?
This bill is not changing it.
Got you. Thank you. It's refreshing. Thank you.
Very good. Senator Quarterman.
Thank you, Erica. Just for clarification, so the 10 million will stay the 10 million, but it can be a May of 15 or 20 out years, but there'll always be at least 10 though, correct?
That was the suggestion, yes.
Right. Okay, and then the flexibility. Thank you.
All's in favor with the amendment? Oh, sure, please.
In this bill, it says that if a public high school
I'm sorry, there
in
was
the
a cough
local
there.
school system's jurisdiction
She needs
is
to
not
say.
assigned a school resource
So,
officer.
Senator, we missed the first part of what you said.
I'm sorry.
We didn't hear, someone coughed and we didn't hear what you were saying, so could you start over again?
Oh. So I'm not the only person here with a hearing problem. Hear that? Oh my God, that's so refreshing.
There's a lot of refreshment going on around here.
Okay. It says on page number 2, line 20. It says if a public high school in the local school system's jurisdiction is not assigned a school resource officer, the adequate local law enforcement coverings that will be provided to the public high school, which means that if you do not have a resource person in the school, if the police department of that particular jurisdiction of Prince George's County is assigned to that school, then that officer has to be compensated through this fund. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's current law. That's what, when this bill was passed back in, I believe, 2017. That's how it was structured, with concern that depending on where the schools are, how many might be right next to each other, this was provided for some flexibility on how a county might deal with, threats at a school in a way that's flexible for the county to choose how to address it.
But the person who is assigned to that school, whether it is a person that's stationed there as a resource person, or if it is someone from the sheriff's department or the police department, must be, they don't get the funding from the schools, from the school system itself, from the Board of Education. That money comes out of this pot. They are compensated out of this pot. Is that correct?
I would need to double check that.
But that's existing.
because that's all existing law, so I would have to refresh my memory. On,
They are compensated.
I'd have to refresh my memory because that's existing law. That I would want to read, not all of the code section is in here. I would want to read that to verify for you.
Okay,
You want to wait until this is looked into a little more?
I'm sorry.
Would you like to wait until she has time
That
to
would
look
be
in?
helpful.
Okay, we
We
can
just
wait
wait
on
one
this.
more day.
We can wait, that's fine. Senator Corbin is very patient, I know. All right, let's go back, let's start back up at the beginning now, 14.
Okay, you have a reprint on your desk. This is a bill that is completely optional for counties under the amendments that are on your desk, as well as it came in introduced as just municipalities. So this allows them to create tourism zones. Some of the rest, I need my bill. So it allows them to create tourism zones. And designate, you know, what those zones would be, their jurisdictions of them. And then part of the benefits, so on page 1, so again, completely authorizing a county or a municipality can set up these zones, tell you how long it's gonna exist. And then the benefit of being in a zone for the appropriate businesses are a couple of things. One, an exemption from the admission and amusement tax to qualifying tourism enterprises, and then a property tax credit. On page 3 of the reprint, you can see some amendments here. The first one is that the political subdivision that establishes the zone needs to also include and notify the comptroller when the zone might expire. Many other zones in current law have a set time period that they exist. In terms of the admissions and amusement tax, that's the local entity can create an exemption for. There's an amendment here. I think the last time that this was discussed with you all about the, you know, the bingo and other state related admissions and amusement tax. This language after line 25 would ensure that locals, if they choose to adopt this benefit, they cannot impact those state admission and amusement tax revenues. And then the property tax credit is both for real property and potentially for personal property. So there's 2 code sections beginning on page 4 of the bill that deals with that. The amendments again add counties to the bill, so it'd be municipal corporations and counties that can do this.
But all this is at their discretion.
Correct.
Mr. Chairman and Ms. Erica, thank you very much for working on this. We start out as a very simple bill and, you know, one of my, you know, I think somebody put that on the board the last time, one of my 3 counties. It's always in the middle of things, but thank you for working this out. And we think we have it squared away now. I think it's a huge benefit now in addition to the municipalities, down the counties as well. So, thank you.
Very good.
I move favorable.
Second.
All in favor?
As amended.
Opposed? As amended.
Yeah.
Okay. 466.
Okay, Senate Bill 466, again, is an authorizing bill for counties and municipalities to establish a trust fund or some sort of fund that works within their financing structure for the purpose of repairing or rehabilitating the infrastructure in communities that are subject to either homeowners associations or condo agreements, structures. So what the bill does, so they can, it's an option to create the fund. And then the bill establishes on page 3 how the funds can be used, including a provision on how they cannot be used. And then the bill also establishes what revenues go into the fund to capitalize it, and then limits the expenditures coming out of the fund. Hold on, let me reread that. Yeah, there's certain proportions in terms of distribution of the funds depending on whether the area has received funds in the past or not. I think in an effort to kind of share the wealth. And that's the bill. I'm not aware of any amendments, and there's no state fiscal impact.
Okay. Questions?
Favorable.
Second. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? No, Rosebud.
Senator Guzon.
Floor leader. Okay, got it.
I figured you'd like to do it.
Today, no. Sure. I'd have to look it up. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, now we need to do, we got the next three are all, we're secondary on again.
So the first one, 482, their vote sheet says they voted favorable with amendment, but I thought it was just favorable. Do you have their vote sheet, Kim? Well, explain it to you as is. It was explained to me that it was a favorable vote. I'm not sure why the vote sheet says that. Maybe, but usually that would have, I should have gotten the reprint regardless. So this is an administration bill that codifies the governor's office for children, and specifies that, why is this not even on the list? You know what? I need another day with this, given that confusion.
Okay.
I don't know why the vote sheet says favorable with amendment and I don't
All
have the
right,
amendments.
we'll get back to that one. All right, 775.
Alrighty. 775, this one they absolutely voted favorable. So there is no amendment. Okay, so this one has to do with state offices and employees and with surety bonds and insurance policies. So basically it repeals provisions pertaining to the Maryland State Employees Surety Bond Committee and transfers some duties instead to the state treasurer. And it authorized certain officers and employees who are covered by surety bonds to instead be covered by insurance. Fiscal impact is it potentially results in operational efficiencies and potential cost savings because of consolidating duties and responsibilities. This original thing goes all the way back to 1967, so that's being reorganized.
Very good. Yes,
There was, I attended the hearing, there was no opposition. Everybody was in favor of it. I'd be favorable.
very good. I was just gonna suggest that when one comes up that you actually sat in on, you should just let us know that it's fine, or however you felt about it. So, all right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. One more.
There's no floor leader because that was
There.
triply.
We're secondary, yeah.
Yeah, that's all right.
797.
Okay, so the next bill, you have a reprint and I did mark it up. It does many things. In general, this bill deals.
What? It does many?
It does many things.
From the sponsor?
In
We
general.
love you, Katie.
In general, it's dealing with the IEP process for special education students. And it's creating a fund so that students, as they navigate through that process, will have some sort of advocacy, potentially an attorney, to help them with that. So specifically, the first several changes have to do with providing notice of this new fund, which the bill will create, and I'll get to in a minute, to the parents and family through all the various stages of the process. Let's see, that's marked up. Notices on page 4, notices on page 5. More notice on the top of page 7.
Does this mean that we're gonna have a fund to pay attorneys for special education cases?
Yes. I'll get, that's in a
We're gonna
couple
get there.
pages.
It's not a separate, it's through Maryland Legal Services.
Okay, but, okay,
And there's restrictions and eligibility that I'll get to. in a
All right.
minute. Yeah. So initially the bill came in requiring some collection of information. Triple E struck that. Then on page 8 of the bill, this is where we got into the meat of the program. So initially as the bill came in, an advocate is an individual that could assist in navigating this. I guess Triple E thought that advocate should be defined, so they added that in. An eligible student needs to have a household income of not more than 150% of the income guidelines that Maryland Legal Services establishes. The purpose of the program, again, is to direct resources to students to help with legal, advocacy, and consultant services. It identifies at the bottom of page 9 what the Maryland Volunteer Lawyer Services needs to do in terms of advertising, create a list of qualified attorneys, advocates, and consultants that families can use, as well as compile data. On page 10, you can see that Triple E added some of the responsibilities, as well as can authorize. They also wanted that the advocates to allow the volunteer lawyer service to train advocates for this. There's additional eligibility criteria for the students to participate beginning on page 10, line 16. And on to the next page. Then the special fund is created. They did change it. Initially, the volunteer lawyer service would be the ones administering the fund. Triple E changed that to the department. And then let's see, the part that is particular to you all is on page 12. Initially, the fund for annually beginning in 2026, the governor was required to do a $2 million appropriation into the fund. They struck the 2 million and turned it into 1 million. And then there's some more process stuff about how to access it, and payment process. There is a lifetime maximum for each student to receive out of the fund of $20,000. There's also, it would pay the individual, the advocate, or the attorney, their customer rate, but capped at $200 per hour. So there's a limit on that, at least from the fund. More data collection and a report.
And if you look on your Senate ad sheet from the budget, you'll note that there is $1 million contingent on the passage of this bill. Yeah.
I have more questions about it.
You may.
I mean, I get it. It's fiscally responsible in the short run. We put $1 million in there for that, but it seems potentially extremely expensive in the long run. Do we have any estimates of how many kids would qualify?
See if Stacy can come up and get into the weeds.
I thought it was really compelling hearing. I mean, a lot of people, there's a lot of need. I don't know what the extent of the need is, but there was no one opposed to it either.
Identifying how many students.
I just know how much money is spent each year on special education, legal fees and stuff, and I don't want to get us started into something that we can't finish.
You may recall that we've had bills that we're gaining. I think, I don't know, is it a presumption bill? Is that
That bill has been around,
I know.
yeah, for years. I'm not aware of that ever.
Yep, but
Passing.
we were.
Right. I think this was in response to that.
This is the response to that.
This is a response to some other legislation that had been proposed last year. So this is a response that is a little lighter handed, maybe?
Yes, significantly.
I think this is an excellent thought. But I do have to agree with my great friend over there, the senator, that it's going to be very expensive. And the question becomes, are we going to have enough money, enough financial resources available to pay for this program? Because I think that what they're advocating or suggesting is just a drop in the bucket.
So, as is almost everything with Maryland Legal Services, we don't come close to covering whether it's evictions, whether it's
right.
You name it, the services that they provide, we don't get there. This is just I think a very important area. That I think we should be ensuring that those of limited income can participate, if you will, or engage in the system in a fairer sense. And if we don't give them any opportunity, they're never going to have the opportunity to have the same sort of fair representation. A lot of people, and I know people in my own county, when IEPs will hire somebody to do it. This is maybe not perfect, but we are quite never perfect in what we are able to provide for folks who are at the lower income. But this is an attempt to help some people create a more fair system. Senator Jackson?
One, would this also cover the students that are who aren't able to, that the public schools aren't able to provide services for that go to the non-public schools, as we have been doing over the years? That's the first question. Second question is, I know that over the years, I know that over the years,
I just said I'm fine with it.
I'm good with the bill as well. Just a couple of questions, but so as I have been aware, when I was sheriff of the county, there was some sort of funding that the public schools had for families when matters such as this arose, and they had attorneys. Was this the same group of people that were providing that, or do we know?
Would those attorneys be the same ones that you've done before? I doubt it.
Okay. You don't think, what?
I don't think in my public school system that attorneys are provided for people to go through the
They're not.
IEP
No,
service.
they're not.
And they have to do it on their own.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all, they hire their own.
Okay. Very cool. Third question, co-sponsor.
Yeah, I would like to.
I'm good. I like the bill. Just
So you're gonna have to send that back over to them, and they'll have to decide what they're gonna take co-sponsors at this point.
I got you. I'll figure it out. I'll get on it. But I would like to know about the first question.
So the first question is, the bill doesn't specify whether the student has to be in public school or non-public
Gotcha.
school. It
That's fine.
centers on the eligibility of the student itself.
That's fine. Thank you. Just want to make sure.
They're solid.
Just wondering. Just wondering, knowing that seems there's a problem financially, would the right thing be putting a cap on something in a way that it won't be overburdened?
Well, this is the cap. 1 million is, 1 million is the cap. What?
You can't put a cap.
Well, I mean, they could, the governor
The
could
governor
put,
can always
could
do
put
more.
more in, of course.
Okay.
Yes,
The
but-
caps
but-
that are in here, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The caps that are in here is the hourly fee for an attorney and the lifetime amount that a family can make use of this.
Senator Corman?
I may have missed that. I apologize. Is it staying a shall or is it going to May? For the $1 million?
I believe this one's the shall.
Okay.
Yes. Senator Zucker?
Yeah, thank you very much. No, I think, what's interesting is, that this has had many iterations throughout its time. And, I could tell you that, I was lucky that I had a mother that was a great advocate. No one really wanted to get on our bad side, but had things gone differently, I don't think we would have had enough money to pay for an advocate for me at that time. So this is, and I was pretty lucky being even lower income at that time, but I think for countless families, not countless, but there are a number of families, especially if there's language barriers, that just don't have this access. And since, the hard work of this committee and the chairman, we've already have money in the budget for it. Let's make sure it's used for the purposes that we already fenced it off for, at least for the time being. So I would encourage us to support the bill.
Favorable.
Senator, yep, Senator.
Yeah, I see where the train is going. But I do have concerns about this. I mean, all of us have experience with the special ed situation in different ways, with either personal sense or constituents or students, and Senator Benson's case. My observation is the system is very lopsided. There's no question about it. It's folks who can afford to pay a lawyer and get a lot more attention than folks who can't afford to pay a lawyer. Clearly, that's the case. I think there are lots of kids in this situation. And I think we ought to be thinking a little longer term, bigger, and more strategically about it, because $1 million, I don't know, at $200 an hour, I can't do that math in my head, how far that goes. But I don't think it goes very far to help very many kids. And so the question then becomes, a few kids get some help and most kids don't get help. Or we come back and say, oh my gosh, now we got to spend a lot more money on this. So I worry a lot about the fact.
Concern in that. Yeah.
I appreciate that. I appreciate your comments. I appreciate Senator Benson's comments. I mean, and I think someone needs to put a lot more thought into what the strategy is of helping lower income working class families with kids who need special ed services. And this, I'll just say it. I mean, I think this bill feels good, but I don't think it's a very strategic approach to making progress. So.
Just as a quick comment to that, a couple of years back, we had a civil, what is that term? We had a commission on the whole host of things that Maryland Legal Services.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that.
Yeah, this civil right to counsel.
Mm-hmm.
And I served on it, I think, probably for a couple of years. One of the reasons I got engaged in these issues at all. The reality is that you pick a topic and we're underfunded on it.
I agree with that.
Dramatically.
I agree with that.
Dramatically. So I appreciate the want to come up with a long-term solution that helps everybody or most people.
Never will.
But I don't see that as I mean, this is a step. It's a step. This is the first time that we've ever even addressed this issue. We spent many years just talking about trying to shift the case in the sense that the burden of proof would be put on the school system.
I know the issue very, very well.
And what was considered then a dramatic cost to our school systems. That's why that was rejected. And so this to me is a good first step to trying to address the issue that there are people out there, particularly of low income, who don't have any way to any representation. To me, I think it's it's one of those, don't make the right of the good. So
Move favorable on the bill.
if you can certainly
All I'd like to say is I'm not going to keep us here longer at this at 4:45 on Friday afternoon.
Right.
But I want to put the flag in the ground that I think the legalistic approach to special ed has not been a great success. It hasn't been a great success for kids at all levels. And I think if we think strategically about it, we should be thinking more in terms of the actual education and less about the legal issues. And that's really where I'm coming from on this. I'd rather pay a teacher $200 an hour than a lawyer $200 an hour to help special ed kids. I'll leave it at that.
No, I think I mean, that's an interesting point and a fair point. You know, maybe, once we get through, or maybe part of, the blueprint, it's
Yeah.
point 2,
Okay, thanks.
right? Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I do have a second. And, all those in favor? Opposed? Okay. Yes. So,
Just if we have a moment for one more bill that we were second on, that came out of JPR this morning. Senate Bill 439. Bill just reminded me that it came over.
Got it while you were all in.
okay. We've been,
439.
if we've got it, and we're here, and since we all love being here at 5 o'clock.
It's super minute.
Exactly.
439 is JPR's primary, you all are secondary. This bill would establish a Victims of Domestic Violence Program Grant Fund. There's already an existing program. I believe you all were secondary because as introduced, the bill authorized the governor to include an annual appropriation of 5 million to the fund. According to Cisco, I think 2.1 is already being spent on the program.
It's a May.
It's a May.
Yes.
That was it. Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
All right. Okay, good day, everybody. Rest up,
So we have to be back here when on Monday?
for session.
That's it?
As far as I'm concerned, I mean, you may have other obligations, but